Hello and welcome along to the Westminster Roundup with the Sport and Recreation Alliance. I'm your host, Alex Sexton. Delighted to once again be joined by the Alliance's Public Affairs lead, Ryan McCulloch. How are you, Ryan?
I'm very good, Alex. Beautiful day. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. Enjoying the sunny weather in the summer. Speaking of which, we know that Parliament have been into recess, but we'll touch upon that a little bit later on because there's so much more to dive into, first of all, with recent announcements. And I think the headline of which is the reopening of facilities we've seen recently.
Yeah, so facilities reopened just at the back end of last weekend, 25th of July. And that was when sort of indoor facilities, swimming pools and everything were allowed to open. I know we knew that was coming and we talked about the announcement in the last couple of roundups previously, but it's actually happened. Large number of facilities have opened. Gyms, I know, are very excited to be able to open, and the local gyms by me are very busy. I think it's not been how shall I put it? It's not been sort of globally accepted, if you like, or globally celebrated, because there have been plenty of facilities for whom it's been impossible to open. So particularly a lot of local authority facilities and leisure centres have struggled to reopen, and a lot of pools have struggled to reopen. Swimming pools have struggled to reopen as well. And there's a range of issues there, and some are unique to the individual setting. But broadly speaking, I think some of the things that we're hearing certainly are that their financial viability is an issue. Staffing costs given the long shutdown, the practicalities of the costs of making a COVID secure environment, and a range of things around that. And I know that in Parliament this week, or last week I should say now, a parliamentary question was asked by the MP Michael Fabricant to the Sports Minister about picking up this point, making sure that there's funding available for leisure facilities, swimming pools who aren't able to reopen for financial reasons. And unfortunately, I don't think the Minister's answer was great. He alluded to the financing that's already out there, etc., and some of the extra money Sport England's put on, which is great, but I don't think there's going to be anything new there. And you know, if there's nothing new, then the situation for these facilities is not going to change. So they need financial backing now. I think a couple of ways that can be done. In particular, we're probably looking at extension of employment support schemes, so that if facilities remain closed, there is the potential to continue a furlough scheme, but also possibly less of a tapering in the furlough scheme. And we really could do with an injection of cash into local authorities to allow them to start opening those facilities safely.
You mentioned funding as an issue, and that was always going to be the case at the moment. We've seen how much government are spending on keeping the country running, not just in our sector, but obviously outside of that as well, across arts, leisure, all sorts of different communities. One thing that has been spoken of and referenced by a couple of our members is the potential to extend some VAT relief to the sector. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, so it's an interesting point, and some of our members may have seen that, particularly the Rugby Football League, I know, published a lot of information about this, and it's an interesting one because, I've talked about a couple of things the government could do, and we do need that money, but there are things that we could do as well as a sector, rather than just keep asking for money. And I think this is one of them. So I'm sure plenty of people will have seen the cut in VAT particularly for the hospitality sectors and the arts sectors to get people back in. You'll have seen in your local sort of restaurants and places that the VAT was cut from 20% to 5% until early next year. The idea for that is that, I guess, that you pass on a lower price to consumers, you drive people coming in, you drive custom, but also there's a possibility for businesses who have lost a lot of money to charge at the 20% rate still, i.e. keep the price the same and only pay 5% VAT, therefore, recovering some of the losses that they've made during the coronavirus pandemic. And I think what we would like to see is that extended to sport, and particularly sports tickets, so that when we can start selling sports tickets again, when we can look to reopen, given that it's going to be at a lower capacity anyway, it would be nice for sporting organisations to be able to sell the tickets, make more of the revenue, and reinvest that into grassroots sport and into their own facilities, so that all of those can open. Because it isn't just local authority facilities that have struggled; it is club-owned facilities. And if we can find a way of making some more revenue to feed into that grassroots level, then we can make sure that we start getting more and more facilities open for people.
That'll certainly be an area that we explore and look into a little further over the coming weeks. Just to quickly reference as well, we have seen a lot of success stories with our members getting return to play guidance published via DCMS and getting the right sign off from Public Health England as well. So a massive thank you to all of our members who have shared that with us. That information and that guidance does live on our website in our COVID-19 section. If you haven't sent it to us, please do. Please get in contact with us via @SportRecTweets or drop us an email to the information line. All of the details on the website for that, but we'd love to host that information. And congratulations to all of our members who have managed to unlock that guidance and to get people back out there playing their activity. Another headline that we saw earlier this week, and something that's rumbled in the background and has taken a bit of a personal angle with our Prime Minister following his own recovery from coronavirus, is around obesity and a strategy to tackle that and to get the nation a bit fitter and more active. So we saw the first signs made this week about advertising for junk food being banned or at certain hours, and there was a sprinkling of activity thrown in there. Fill us in a bit more on that, Ryan.
Yeah, so the obesity strategy been sort of mooted for a couple of weeks now. We've been hearing different things about it and what was going to be in it. And you rightly say, it comes off the back of the Prime Minister's own admission to intensive care when he had coronavirus, which he put down a lot to his own weight and lack of active, healthy lifestyle. And he's subsequently taken a healthy lifestyle. He said he's lost over a stone in weight. And so there's a real sort of war on junk food almost in the obesity strategy. But as you say, there's some activity stuff as well. So if I just go through it quite quickly, as you say, there's a lot of stuff on junk food. So there's a ban on the sort of buy one, get one free promotions, or there's going to be a ban on buy one, get one free promotions for junk foods and other unhealthy products. And that includes not putting them by the tills, those sort of grab and go purchases as you bought everything else that reel you in. And there's also going to be a ban on advertising of junk foods before the 9 p.m. watershed. I saw some stats that said in the government's release that said that the highest proportion of ads are between 6 and 9 p.m, which is when kids watch a lot of TV before they go to bed. And so I think the government is sort of trying to steer away from that and get people to longer, healthier livelihoods. There's going to be an extension too of the weight management services available on the NHS. And there's also going to be some stuff around the traffic light system and calorie labelling to make sure people know exactly how many calories they're consuming, because I think the government estimate that people are consuming something like 200 to 300 more a day on average than they should be, which contributes to weight gain. As you rightly say, there was some physical activity provision in there. So the government are going to invest hugely in cycling, 2 billion. I think that's over 5 years. So obviously that doesn't sound as impressive when you break it down, but it is more money for cycling and cycling infrastructure and walking too. So to encourage people on the active travel side of things, how you get to work, everything else, which is really to be welcomed on our side. Anything that can get people on that first step towards activity is great. So, if they can be active in traveling to work and people get into active lifestyles more, then we can see it filter through. And we can see it filter through to wider sport and physical activity. I would say slightly disappointed not to see something more widely in there for sport and physical activity, because I think obviously the more you enjoy something, the more likely you are to do it, and therefore a wider investment would have been great. And I think if the government are going to encourage people into active lifestyles, then as we've already talked about, they need to invest in the facilities to make sure they're available for any upturn or a hopeful upturn in participation, which wasn't covered in the strategy. I know there's going to be some more consultation going forward, but there is for me, a slight missed opportunity there in not including more sport and physical activity. But it is to be welcomed that the government are encouraging healthier and more active lifestyles generally at that level, and that the recognition is there at the top of government, particularly with the Prime Minister's own experience, that it is important for people in their everyday lives.
And I think you're right to touch upon that double-edged sword, and it's fantastic to have that buy-in from the top level in government and for this to start being addressed. And it's something that at the Alliance we've spoken of, especially over the last 2 or 3 years. We released our childhood obesity report. We've been banging the drum for increased level of commitment to physical activity, green spaces. And you're right, with the infrastructure at the moment, especially during the times of COVID-19, we want to make sure that this is sustainable and the long-term physical activity industry is protected. So like you mentioned, Ryan, a welcome introduction, more work to do, and certainly something that we'd love to hear from our members about, and something that we will always be pushing behind the scenes in government and in Parliament. We strongly believe that physical activity is the answer to a lot of questions out there at the moment. So hopefully a good start, but more work to do behind the scenes. As mentioned as well a little earlier on, Parliament have now gone into recess and enjoying their own summer holidays, but that certainly doesn't mean that our policy team at the Alliance are taking their eye off the ball. We have a lot more on the way, especially in the autumn months. So Ryan, what can we expect to see once summer holidays are over?
Yeah, really good chance actually, Alex, now that Parliament is in recess, as you say, to take a bit of a look ahead and get some forward planning going on about it. Not always easy to forward plan when government make announcements here and there, but there are a couple of things that we know will be coming up, particularly fairly early as we start back in September and then through to the sort of end of the year. The first one I want to quickly pick up on is Brexit, and it seems strange that I haven't been talking about that the whole time, given what's been going on, as I thought 2020 would be consumed by that. But the government is starting to try and accelerate, and it will continue over the summer recess in Brussels, negotiations with the European Union on a post-Brexit trade deal. The government have missed the deadline, which was the end of June, for extending any possible transition period, and that's due to finish 31st of December. So the point there is that when the 31st of December comes, if no trade agreement has been reached, then we are in sort of a no deal Mark II situation, and there will be changes on day one, the 1st of January 2021, to the movement of people and goods and everything else. It's not always easy to get the information out of government. It's moving at quite a slow pace, but I think it's going to accelerate. We'll obviously keep members updated with the more that comes in, but really just trying to get in there early with sort of 5 or 6 months ago to say to members, do you remember that no deal planning we talked to you about last year? Well, dig that out and start thinking about what you might need in the immediate term on day one in January, because we could be in that situation if no trade agreement is reached. But as per a Brexit deal last year, it's a little bit up in the air, because if we do reach a trade agreement, then all the details of that will need to be disseminated out. But for now, it's just to keep on the radar that that's going to accelerate at pace, and the deadline's the 31st of December this year.
Certainly, and as you referenced, Ron, our Brexit section of the website is still there. So if anybody needs that information, please do take a look at that. And if you have any direct questions, you can email the policy team and they'll be able to get back to you on that. Definitely worth flagging though, because as Ryan mentions, that January the 1st deadline is coming a lot closer, and we need to start preparing ourselves as a sector. And something else as a sector we need to start preparing for is the comprehensive spending review, and we're expecting movement on that come the autumn.
Yeah, exactly. So that's almost even more immediate than Brexit in some ways. The spending review was announced by Rishi Sunak last week, I believe. They're taking submissions to that up until the 24th of September. Anyone can submit to that online. Essentially, for those who don't know, the spending review sets departmental budgets for a 4-year period, and it sets their spending in a couple of areas. And so essentially it's important for us, because we want to make sure that our sector is represented, and that in government spending they prioritise the work of DCMS, and particularly the F part of DCMS, and that Treasury recognise the importance, which we hope something like the obesity strategy will have impressed upon them. But we'll be formulating sort of a campaign with a couple of key asks about that, particularly around coronavirus recovery. So we'll be looking at making sure that the sector's supported. We can support jobs, etc., coming out of coronavirus, but also we want to be looking at the piece which has run throughout this today, actually, and a couple of the things we've talked about, which is the facilities ask. So making sure that the government invests in the basic bricks and mortar infrastructure on the ground, grassroots, so that people can have physically active and healthy lifestyles. And we want the government to sort of represent that in any spending review. And I think there is a lot of the build, Northern Powerhouse stuff that's going to be, the spending review is going to reflect. And I think that it is crucial, and we would say this, of course, but it's crucial that we are seen as part of that infrastructure for the country. Sport and physical activity should be alongside roads and rail with the infrastructure of the country, because it's that important to people. So that is the overarching big dream point we want to make to government when it comes to the spending review is invest in us and we'll deliver.
And of course, to deliver that message, we need the help of our members. So I know that over the coming weeks, we'll start getting in contact with you and start requesting some information, some feedback from you, because as Ryan says, it's important. Actually, we are part of that infrastructure, and we would say that as the Alliance, and we know you would agree to that, but it really is an important spending review, and we want to make sure that our case is heard, and we can only do that with your assistance. Speaking of assistance, Ryan, how can our members get in touch with the policy team?
The best way, policy@sportandrecreation.org.uk inbox. Any of us on Twitter is fine. Also, and also Sportrec tweets is fine as well. If you've got any questions, and email is not your thing.
And although it's a summer recess for Parliament, that won't stop myself and Ryan from keeping you updated. So we will be returning with another Westminster Roundup very soon.